Hello and welcome to the Dreaming and Doing podcast with me, Nikki Raby. I'm an actor, coach, writer, speaker, podcaster and a mum. And in my coaching work, I work with creatives, personal brands, freelancers and small businesses. In my podcast, I talk about success, but not in a traditional sense. I have conversations with those who have built a business from something they love or who have made a pivot in their career. Also those who have built a brand or a job that maybe didn't exist when they were at school, and they found a way to monetize their skills, talents and expertise. I've spoken to loads of incredible people, coaches, designers, journalists, app creators, magazine editors, bloggers, content creators, authors, and all-round movers and shakers. I ask the questions that you want to know the answer to. So how they started, about money, saying no, saying yes, pitching, presenting, putting yourself out there even though it terrifies you, standing out in a busy online world, growing, scaling and making your work for you and your circumstances. The show notes are always at nikkiraby.com/podcast and the conversation continues across social media, often on Instagram, my favourite platform, at Nikki Raby. Thanks so much for listening. It's great to have you with us. In today's episode, I'm talking to Hannah Ashwell-Dickinson, who's a professional organiser and coach and a mum to 2 girls living a simple life in East London. And she helps people to move past the overwhelm, oh my goodness, I know this so well, of a cluttered home and supports them to create the home and life that they really want. And Hannah's passionate about living a simple and intentional life and encourages others to do the same. And also, fun fact, Hannah was the person that introduced Matt and I 11 years ago, so I have a lot to thank her for also. In this episode, we talk about building a business, even if you're an introvert or you're not naturally a visible person, as in putting yourself out there and shouting about your business, but also working really slowly and being really intentional about how you build your business slowly but surely. There'll be loads of chat, as always, over on Instagram, so come and join us there at Nikki Raby, or the show notes, nikkiraby.com/podcast. Also, if you want one-to-one coaching with me, I do have a couple of spots opening up in London over the autumn, not many though, so come and have a look, nikkiraby.com/coaching. I tend to work with freelancers, creatives, small business owners and personal brands. So if that's you and you need a bit of help to take you to that next level, please let me know. Anyway, enough chat from me. Here is today's episode. Hannah, welcome to the podcast.
Hi Nikki, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. So let's start with you. What's your name and where do you come? No, what do you do? What's your job title these days?
My job title is I'm a professional organiser. So I'm an organiser and declutterer, and I also coach people. So I work in people's houses, helping them declutter their stuff. Usually quite vulnerable people or quite overwhelmed people, and I sort of offer them one-on-one time to help them let go of their stuff and then get organised.
Amazing. And how did that happen? How did that sort of transition? Because I guess, I often say it on the podcast as well, like it probably wasn't something that the careers advisor advertised at that time. You do usually get a competitive mother going, right, you need to clear up this pigsty right now. But how did that start for you?
Well, the long version is I spent 10, 15 years working in the theatre, which I loved. And I guess that has an element of being organised, organising schedules, organising props. So I was a stage manager working with actors and I loved it. Slightly naively thought with my partner, we'd just jump in and start a family, and thought the whole freelancing theatre thing would be really easy to juggle with having a kid. And I think you've sort of described, Nikki, before about when you had your son, you felt like he'd come out and they'd put a sort of fireball inside you of ambition. Well, I had the exact opposite. I felt like I'd I mean, I loved my daughter, but I felt like I'd sort of lost something. I had a lot of anxiety and I found it quite difficult to go back to work. So although I did spend 2 years in and out of freelancing jobs, I'd kind of lost my passion for it, and was a bit lost. And then we had our second daughter, which was wonderful, but I'd kind of knew I didn't want to go back into theatre, and was sort of had a little secret about decluttering, that maybe that might be something I wanted to do, and I didn't even know that was a job. But I actually spent 2 years really on my own decluttering journey, as they say, trying to get rid of all the clutter in our house to then move forward, I guess. So then declutter my mind as well. So I kind of used a coach and said very quietly, I think I might want to be a declutterer, and I don't know if that's even a job.
Isn't it
and then
weird when you admit that to somebody, you know, you start to say it out loud and you kind of, you're sort of sweating a bit and you can't quite say it in a normal voice, because there's something weird about owning it, isn't there?
Yeah, owning it and sort of making a decision to leave something behind. And working in the theatre, for me, you know, that's a family. You build a family there, and that was part of my identity. So to sort of leave that behind, there was a bit of a grieving process, I think, about that. And then to sort of step forward and, you know, work with someone and say, I don't even know if this is a job. And then actually discovering that there are about 200 professional organisers in the country, which was amazing to think, oh, you know, that's actually a business. People are doing that job and paying their mortgages. How wonderful. So starting to connect with those people and build, I guess, a new family. I love being around a sort of community of like-minded people. So I sort of spent, I guess, a few months figuring out what that was, what that job was, doing a little bit of training and getting out there and working with people, and discovering that there are a lot of people out there who really struggle with various levels of clutter and disorganisation. That's the quick version, or the long version.
Yeah, I am definitely in that boat of sometimes like just having so much stuff, and certainly because I live in London as well, you know, space is at a premium, and I think it's when you have a baby as well that suddenly you just accumulate all this. You know, for a long time in our house it was just Matt and I, and then suddenly you have to incorporate new people and all of their stuff, and it's always that thing actually that if you go away for a 2-week holiday, your baby has more than anybody else really. How was that journey, let's use the word again, why not, for you, of sort of figuring out this new chapter for yourself, and sort of did it bring stuff up, did it take a while, what really helped you make this transition?
It was quite a long journey in a way, we'll use that word again. My partner works away from home a lot, so I do a lot of solo parenting, and I needed to make whatever work I do kind of work around that. So when my daughter started her 15 hours at nursery is when I started saying, right, I want to be ready when she gets her 30 hours, ready to go, have a business ready to go. So I sort of used those 15 hours to start doing a bit of research, to start building a website. And I was very much doing that with no money, as in we didn't have money to put into a business. And actually starting your own business as a declutterer doesn't involve huge amounts of cash. But I was working within her 15 hours and then again into her 30 hours of trying to make that work and not sort of spend extra on childcare. So I guess that was a kind of limitation, but it meant that I worked a lot more efficiently, I think.
Yeah.
And it did bring up a lot of stuff. Me pressing send or go or whatever on my Facebook business page, which I did first while I was building my website, felt absolutely massive. To say to the world or my Facebook friends, I'm doing something else, and actually working through why that was even an issue. And as you know, my friends were never going to be like, how ridiculous, why would you do that? You know, they were just all going, oh, that sounds cool, I've never heard of that. Or, oh, I really need a declutterer. Or, you know, and I think working through what my anxieties were about sort of changing tack were, you know, turned out to be absolutely fine, but to kind of do it step by step. And I think I am kind of a slow burner. I like to do things at my own pace. And I didn't want to add in lots of overwhelm, given that I was mostly just me looking after our 2 kids and doing the nursery run and the school run, I felt that I needed to kind of keep it contained. So I've spent the last 2 years building up, adding things, adding packages, offering more to my clients as I can take it on. Because what I don't want to do is find that I'm not modelling good behaviour, I guess, to clients, being very overwhelmed and not being able to kind of, and I do want to be able to pop into my daughter's school and see their class assembly, when possible. And I want to be able to work flexibly so I can do that for the next few years, which is, in one sense, a bit of a luxury. But we'd spent several years in the kids' early years living on one salary. So we kind of just had to stick to that and me start building stuff up.
I think that's a really great way of looking at it, because you want to always make sure that you're actually building the business that you want. And I'm very conscious of that sometimes, of when things suddenly start to get bigger, then something else has to go. And before I had Oscar, I would still kind of go, no, it's fine, I'll just keep saying yes, because I'm excited to do this. And I certainly got to a point when he was about 18 months where I just felt like, exactly all of those things that you're describing, completely overwhelmed and just anxious and just like, oh my goodness, my head is about to combust. And what I now need to do is actually take stuff away rather than just keep adding and being one of those like nodding cats in a window in a Chinese restaurant, that I have to actually go, no, if you're getting the glazed look in your eye, it's time to shift things.
Yeah. And I think, I'm quite protective over my time and my family's time. But I have to make sure that I don't say no to things because they're scary. So earlier in the year, late last year, I was asked to do a talk locally about decluttering, and I was thinking, no, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to stand up in front of 20 people and talk? That's not really my thing. Yeah. But actually I said yes, because I was like, well, of course I should do that. That's good exposure for me locally. So I have to make sure that I'm kind of not being stuck in a kind of comfort zone that's all very easy, that I'm sort of push myself out of that, which is not my natural thing to do, but then be protective over not kind of over delivering. And I think I try to set quite good boundaries with my clients of what I offer them out of their sessions in terms of email and when I'll reply to them, so that I'm not kind of at their beck and call. Yeah. And I think that comes from 15 years of working in the theatre, where a director can ring you at midnight and that's just okay, and actually
bloody actors with their high emotions going, can you tie my shoelaces?
Absolutely. And whilst that's sort of so enjoyable and I like to kind of serve people and help them, I now want to do that with boundaries, because I've also got to look after my kids, and I quite like to have a social life as well. Imagine
that. How nice. Yeah. It's really interesting what you say about, because we were having a chat before we came on here about visibility, and I know that sometimes and I talked about it in terms of those times where you have quiet months or things, you feel like you're doing stuff or you're busy, but maybe you're not getting the rewards that you want. There's a blog post, I'll link to it in the show notes, but sometimes there is that sense of, for me, all I need to do is keep showing up and being visible. And I imagine that talk would have been great for people getting to know you, because also as well, they're in decluttering or saying that you need help, whether that's working with a coach or a personal trainer or a nutritionist or some sort of goddess healer, it feels quite a lot to say, I'm struggling with this. And there's, I don't know if it's a British thing, but there's sometimes a bit of shame around that.
Yeah, that absolutely is. And I often will get a call or an email from someone, and I'll call them back or I'll email them back, and then I won't hear from them. And it could be up to 9 months I've had, and then someone will get back in touch because they're ready. Sometimes they'll think they're ready and they're not. And some people ask me to meet them away from their home first to talk to me because they feel shame about their home. And, I've kind of seen everything. They don't need to worry about that. But, lots of them are ringing me because they don't invite their friends over because they're ashamed of their houses, which just to me is a bit heartbreaking. That's why I love to kind of go in there and help them start managing the flow of stuff and make them feel like it's livable. And nothing I do is about making people's houses have a sofa and a pot plant and white walls. You know, the people that I work with, I mean, some people want that, and that's kind of quite rewarding to kind of make someone look like they live in the ideal home show or whatever, but they want to live functionally, and they want to be able to get their kids out the door and not always be searching for their keys, you know. And I think that's the kind of distinction, that it's not about being a minimalist and only owning 33 things, unless that's what they, you know. And that's the same when I talk about kind of wanting to live a more simple life. I am not sort of coming back from the school run and baking loaves of bread like that. It's not that. I'm a terrible person. You know, and if people want to do that, they absolutely should. But when you're living in London, it's fast paced, and you need to kind of take a breath, and
sometimes you just need carbs right now. You can't wait for them to rise.
Wait for them to rise and to be kneading the dough. But, you know, I have sort of simplified our lives in terms of meal planning, and just going, do you know what, we can eat the same things on rotation, and that's okay. And because I don't particularly like cooking, it doesn't bring me a lot of joy. You know, if you do like cooking, have all the baking implements and enjoy that. But if it's not your thing, you don't have to pretend that it is. If you're not going to use that juicer, you know, or that bread maker, you know, pass it on to someone else. I think that's the thing.
Oh, that's so true. And people buy you appliances for Christmas or things, you know. I guess, you do accumulate all these things because people thought you might like them. And also as well, when people start to declutter at their own thing, they pass them on. And, you know, it's all very lovely and charitable, but I have got much stricter of saying, look, I'm probably not going to wear it, or I'm not going to... you know, do anything with it. And I've started to take pictures of stuff rather than have them, and even getting rid of some photographs. It's like, I don't like the way I didn't enjoy that night. I don't like the way that I looked on that night. I look really sad, and I don't like the person I'm standing next to with my arm around. So why am I holding on to it?
Yeah. If it's not giving me a good feeling, I don't need to have it. You know, I think that's the key thing. It's just being surrounded by things that you like or that are functional. You know, I don't sort of particularly get a lot of joy from my cheese grater, but it works, it's functional. But when I realised I had 3, I was like, you know, I don't think we need 3 cheese graters, you know, unless you're particularly into sort of fromage baking. I don't know.
Yeah, or a cheese scone. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
How would you, so if people are listening and they are listening and maybe sitting on their sofa and having a look round and going, oh yeah, because I think it's also as well when you suddenly start to turn up your awareness on these things, it's only then that you go, how long has that letter been sitting there? Or, you know, that weird picture on the wall that you're like, I don't even like that anyway. If they're sort of at that point, what are the sort of first steps to start moving and shaking things?
I think if you've got lots of time, you can start with a bigger project, like one room or one cupboard. I think if your time's limited, like if you've got small children around or you're working full time, then starting with one surface and one shelf and just sort of making decisions about things. Most clutter comes from when we don't make a decision. So we just put something down and think we'll do it later. And that's how it all sort of builds up. And I think if you look at a shelf and think, do I even like the things on that shelf? Where does this really belong? You know, and once you've done one shelf or one kitchen surface, you kind of have to vow to say, I will not just dump stuff on there, and talk to the other people in the house and say, come on, let's commit to keeping that surface clear, and just kind of doing baby steps. And I think it's when you decide to overhaul your whole wardrobe in one evening and you take everything out, and then you get overwhelmed and you can't make decisions because you're a bit fatigued by it all. I think that's when it comes a bit disheartening. And, you know, that's what I offer clients, is that sort of motivation and that encouragement and asking them questions about things. But I would recommend starting small, and, you know, as you would probably advise Nikki, about setting yourself a goal, and whether that's a long-term goal about maybe you want to Airbnb one of your rooms and at the moment it's full of rubbish. You know, that's kind of a great long-term goal to say, by next summer I want this room to be clear or so we can have people to stay. Or we want to sort out our whole house because we want to do a home swap with someone in America next year. And just having those goals in mind helps you kind of stay on track. Or whether it's financial. And, you know, a lot of people have to think about what they're bringing into their houses as well as what's in there already. And that was part of the struggle for me, was buying stuff and kind of buying it for the wrong reasons, and buying things because I was bored, and buying toys because I was bored of being a stay-at-home mom. And there is a bit of that you have to sort of get quite honest with yourself and say, how did this stuff even get here in the first place? And like you said, people like to pass things on, and it's hard to say, actually, we don't need that anymore. But if someone gives you a bag of clothes for your kid, you can say, oh, well, I'll have a look through, and if there's any bits that we won't use, what can I do with it? Who can I pass it on to someone? Or do you want it back? And just empowering yourself to make that decision, so you don't feel like, oh, well, someone's given me a load of clothes and I don't really want them, or we don't need them, and then feeling stuck with them. It's just making those decisions so that they don't sit around.
That's such a good point. And I was also going to say that, like, clutter and the way you live sometimes can be brought up with identity as well. Like, for example, as an actor, you're supposed to be, and it comes up in lots of different ways, like how you live, money, and all kinds of stuff. If you're an actor or a creative, it's rude to sort of ask for money. That the fact that you love what you do is enough. So therefore, you should live a bit hand to mouth, or you should live in a creative warehouse somewhere. Yeah. And actually, like, I really like a good bed. I don't want to sleep on a futon, or like, I want clean sheets and things in order. But yet I think, I'm trying to articulate it in the way that I want to say it, but I think sometimes there were things that I repelled, going into that law of attraction stuff, where I didn't think that was possible because of the type of person that I was. So if I wanted to be creative, then I'd have to live in some kind of madness. And actually, that's not good for my personality.
Yeah, and that's the thing about sort of sitting down when you're looking at your clutter and going, it's a bit deep, but who do I want to be? What kind of life do I want to live? And as you say, you can be, if having lots of things around you, it suits you, then that's fine, then I'm not the person for you. But if you're struggling, and if you're not able to move forward, or your morning's a nightmare every morning, then it's worth thinking about, what kind of life do you want to live? And if you're always getting to the end of the month and struggling, or you're not able to go on the holidays that you want to go on, or you want to be traveling more, then you have to think about what you can let go, because everything you've got in your house needs your time. It needs to be cleaned, it needs to be moved, it needs to be maintained. And if you're wanting to pack up and go on more trips, then you've got to let go of some of that stuff. And I really love stuff, I like shopping, and I have to stop myself saying, I really want another stripy t-shirt. How many stripy t-shirts does one person need? Not as many as I used to.
Imagine your partner, like, you're standing outside Westfield, and he's going, "It's on your mark. No, hold back. Don't go in. Don't go in.
Don't do it." And it's not easy. I'm definitely a consumer, and I have to stop myself from the one-click Amazon. And a lot of it is wanting your kids to have the best stuff and wanting them to have great toys, and actually learning that kids mostly prefer to have less. They're less likely to dump out all the toys out of the basket if there's not so much, and quite often they get overwhelmed themselves, and it's sort of our job to help them navigate how to play. And that's easy to say now. I've got a 4 and an 8-year-old, they can play independently. But kind of not having every toy under the sun helps them kind of focus a bit more, I guess.
You're right, and certainly when it came to bringing a new person into the world and deciding, like, how I wanted his wardrobe to be, not in a kind of, like, I didn't hang up on a coat hanger baby grows or anything like that, because frankly, who has the time to do that? But, like, we made a decision, Matt and I, because we're freelancers, and sometimes my mum would step in, or my stepdad, or my own dad, and I sort of didn't want to have that constant, if I was out of the house, somebody going, where's his swimming bag, or where's the thing, or I can't find it. So we actually made a decision to keep his room quite streamlined and tidy and organised. And it's actually helped me do other things, you know, sometimes, especially with my business as well, before I really started to expand it and delegate some things. I always used to have that, well, I know where it is, so it's absolutely fine. But in creating systems, it's allowed me to grow and somebody else to step in rather than going, it looks like somebody's just vomited all over your desktop.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, Nikki. And we certainly realised the benefit of things, you know, kind of being in order, but that was because we didn't have that much stuff. Was my daughter had 3 or 4 nights in hospital a few years ago, and I was there with her, and suddenly realising that not only could I ring my partner and say, can you bring me my hair straighteners? Can you bring, you know, me a change of clothes? And knowing where those things were, and he kind of knew where they were. And my dad similarly does quite a lot of childcare for us. Him being able to find where things are, you know, and then I can come home from a day's work and feel like it's not a complete nightmare. You know, I can, what I say, sort of reset the house fairly quickly. You know, not everything's where I want it to be, but I have to give up a bit of control. But, you know, there aren't millions of toys everywhere and millions of clothes, and people kind of know where to find things, which I think is quite releasing for me, because I do the majority of the childcare and I quite like the control, I think. But to know that I can walk out of the house and people know where to find stuff is actually really great for me.
Yeah, I did hear a funny story once from a friend who was having her 3rd baby and had like worn one maternity skirt throughout her whole pregnancy, this black long maxi skirt, you know, that jersey material, you can just shove it on. And she was in hospital and she phoned her husband, and for some reason she wasn't wearing it. Maybe she'd gone into hospital in the middle of the night, and she said, oh, can you bring that black skirt in for me? And instead of bringing the one that she had been wearing for the last 9 months, he bought this short skirt that she once wore to a school disco party.
Nice.
And she was like, at no point do I want to be wearing this skirt as I leave a hospital after just having a baby. This feels a little bit ridiculous.
Not ideal skirt.
Not ideal. I mean, I feel that like she got a few looks from the midwives of, you know, you going out somewhere.
Go girl.
Going on the Raz, exactly. And also, how has kind of you becoming visible, how have you done that in a way that feels really good to you? Because I think sometimes there can, I was listening to a podcast the other day with brilliant Holly Tucker, who is the co-founder of Not on the High Street, and her nickname, she was saying, is Holly, it's really hard to say, Holly Hurricane, and you know, she's a bit like, right, off we go, let's go there. But you know, knowing you for a lot of years, you're not that sort of bull in a china shop type personality, and sometimes I think we feel like we have to be that to be progressing our business. How do you do business on your terms in a way that feels good?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I'm not kind of the sort of person who wants to be publicly that visible. I use Instagram. I love Instagram. It's sort of a little creative outlet for me. I think it helps to have that and build trust with people. I tend not to get clients through Instagram, but I know that people that have got in touch with me will click through and feel like they can get to know me a bit more. But I don't really do Instagram lives. And I think that's where I'm at the moment, is building up kind of visibility locally and in London, rather than an online presence as such, because I think it would start taking up too much of my time in a way, and not necessarily for a lot of gain. And don't get me wrong, I love the likes and the comments and all that sort of thing.
Give me the likes.
Give me the likes. And I enjoy the dialogue that I have with people, and I learn a lot about people's struggles by, if I might post something that resonates and someone will say, oh yeah, I really struggle with this. And that's, you know, useful for me to sort of get that insight. But in terms of, being visible, I think it's more about going out there and talking to people about decluttering, because some people have never heard of it and some people think it's a bit mad and why would you ever need a declutterer? And some people it really resonates and they're like, yes, I need you in my life. And I think a lot of what I do, because I work one-on-one, is about building trust, and that's by word of mouth, and kind of showing up on Instagram and showing that, my life isn't perfect. And whilst my pictures are quite nicely curated, the comments and the captions are more about real life, I guess.
That's a lovely balance. And also saying, I think sometimes people don't know that they need you until you say it out loud. And I'm really passionate about that with my clients, of saying, like, you have to tell people what you do, even if it makes you want to be sick in your mouth a little bit, because it feels bold to sort of be out there. But you do have to say it, because the number of times people say, oh, thank goodness. Or, I had a lady the other day saying, I've been looking for you. And that was lovely. But she wouldn't have known that unless I'd said it out loud.
Yeah. And I think, because I work one-on-one with people, there are only so many clients I can have in a year, whereas, so I don't necessarily need to have kind of numbers that are massive, and mine aren't at all on Instagram. But if I move in the next sort of year to be doing some online ebooks or courses, then I would think a bit more about that side of marketing. And certainly marketing, I mean, I've never had to market myself before starting this business. In the theatre, it was just all word of mouth and recommendations, and you just kind of asked for jobs and tried to do well and then got another job, because that's sort of how it worked as a stage manager. So I've kind of been learning about what I call slow marketing. And there's a few people on Instagram that feel a bit more aligned to me than that kind of sell, which, doesn't really suit me. And a lot of my clients, as I say, will touch base with me and then disappear for a little bit and then come back, and they don't need me to be kind of selling, because that's overwhelming for them, I think.
Yeah. And actually, if you're in that state of mind of feeling like, I've had a couple of discovery calls when I was looking for a coach, and I felt like sometimes I'd been shouted at a little bit of, or I've said it on the podcast before, that coach that said I needed to get up at 4 a.m. otherwise I wasn't serious about my business. And I was just like, I'm tired, mate. And like the thought of him shouting at me at 4 a.m. just didn't appeal to me in the slightest. Or like the personal trainer I once saw, and on the first session, I mean, granted, I'd had a lot to drink the day before, which it probably wasn't a good idea booking a 7 a.m. session. But I was like, oh, I feel a bit sick. And he was like, go and be sick in the street and then come back in and we'll get started. And I was just like, I don't think I can be sick in the street. Yeah. It feels all sorts of weird. But you're right. I think people need to get to know you and be safe with you and not feel like it's going to be a bad thing. Because as you say, with decluttering, it's so emotional.
Yeah. A lot comes up for people in sessions about why they hold on to things, or just the point that they're at in their life. And some people ring me it's very simple. They just need to get a bit more organised, but if it's people needing to let go of things, there are all sorts of reasons why they might be holding on to them that we get into. In that sense, it's a bit like a coaching session. And I think, if I'm turning up and going, well, all you need to do is have this box and put your keys there, that's not sort of particularly helpful. I need to help them look at their own life. So I can't subscribe a kind of, there are things that work for me that wouldn't work for you, and vice versa. And it's trying to get a sense of what their life is like and what their values are, I suppose. And there's no point me sort of going, well, what you need to do to get organised is get up at 4 a.m. and, have a good sort and a clean. That's
exactly. Count your cheese graters at 4 a.m. You're so right. And I feel like also that's why I kind of wanted to start this podcast, is that there's very different, many versions of success, and actually each one is brilliant in its own way.
Yeah. And I think that's it.
Donald Trump or something,
Yeah. Let's not talk about him.
Yeah.
And I think, what looks like, I've had people sort of stop me in the street, sort of nursery friends or mum friends say, how's the business going? Are you sort of at it 5 days a week? And I'm thinking, oh gosh, I really don't want to be at it 5 days a week. And that's not what success means to me. And I'm aware that comes from a privileged place, in that I have a partner and we make it work between us in terms of financially, but I'm also sort of looking at the long game and about my health, my ability to look after my children, and so success for me isn't kind of six figures. Now, at some point, I won't want to be necessarily doing all one-on-ones. There's a different business model, but that's into the future, I think. And I'm kind of happy to do what I'm doing at the moment.
Yeah, and I think sometimes you can subscribe to those. I mean, you only have to go on something like Facebook, and then suddenly, you become part of somebody else's avatar, and you get all of those listings and things like that. But also, they're quite flippant statements, and actually, I don't just want to have those moments where one day I buy a pair of Louboutins. Like like this last weekend we went away for just one night, but it felt like we'd been away for a week. It was brilliant. And one thing certainly is I've realised that actually I'm much better when I have lots of little things to look forward to rather than the trip of a lifetime, which sounds very like Big Break from the 90s. But yeah, of course I'd love to go on safari one day, but I also don't want to be like, so we'll do that in 2027.
Yeah, it's worth sort of thinking about what you want in the next year. And as you say, when you've got busy lives and partners are away or doing, are busy, and you're kind of doing a bit of a juggle, you need to have things in place where you go, can we go somewhere for a night or just have trips?
Yeah.
Here, there and everywhere to make you feel like you're not kind of in the rat race, which is essentially not what we all want to do if you're running your own business. You're kind of trying not to be doing 80-hour weeks if possible.
Yeah, and having that headspace and that clarity that actually I need to use that creative side of my brain, and I don't always do that when I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm in that fighting fire situation, and I like to have that space, to wander around or to exercise, or that's where my ideas come, not from just sitting at my desk. I've got one final question, which is, where would you like to be in 5 years' time?
Oh, that's an interesting question. That's quite a big question because we live in East London and we love it, and we're sort of on the cusp of what's next in that sense of where we'll be living. I'd quite like it to be still in East London. And I'm just realising that one of my children will be in senior school by then. So I guess I'll be, upping my game work-wise, because I will have more margin to kind of take on more work. And I suppose by then I would want to be more visible in my business, whether that's online or kind of doing talks. So I don't really know the answer, but more of the same, I think, and more kind of finding the balance of working, which I really enjoy, and also enjoying family time. And I show up best for my kids when I have been doing some work and I've had that bit of myself, that's away from them. So I guess, keeping that balance.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I love that. If people want to come and find out more and get their houses sorted and their lives mentally, all the rest of it, where should they come?
You can find me online at declutterwithhannah.com, and I'm also on Instagram as Hannah Ashwell-Dickinson. And I'm a little bit on Twitter, but not very much. But I am there. I'll reply if you tweet me.
I totally feel the same. I was saying this to Candice a few episodes back of like, Twitter, I don't really understand it. I feel like I'm at the wrong party, so I just stay by the crisps and just sort of go and just have a beak around.
Yeah, I tend to sort of use Twitter as more of a what's happening in the world, and to sort of tweet Hackney Council about something to do with roads or bins. So I'm not, I try to sort of, I don't use it much for work, but I'm there if people want to tweet.
Brilliant. Do they tweet you back, by the way?
On occasion, yeah. If it's something, if you can make it sort of about a health and safety thing, like bus stops and busy roads and things, then they will get back to you.
Not like, I'm tired.
Yeah, not so much if you do that.
Friday vibes, Hackney Council. Yeah, brilliant. All right, love, thanks so much. I've loved it, and I'll add all the show notes to all the links. And also, I just wanted to thank you for setting me up with, well, you didn't know you were setting me up, but you introduced me to Matty all those years ago.
What a pleasure that was to introduce you to. And what are you, 11 years down?
Years, yeah, exactly. And I did say to him as he went out the door today, like, I said, and you were late for that one. He was like, I wasn't late for that one. I was like, I think you were. So
I can't remember, but let's say he was. Let's say. And
apparently I fell asleep on that night because I'd had a lot to drink. But anyway. But I think that's all alleged.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Take care. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I would love to hear what you thought of the episode and share any takeaways with me. Come and find me across social media at Nikki Raby, or you can visit the podcast page, nikkieraby.com/podcast.